But we begin this hour with Congressman Adam Kinzinger and the January 6th committee's work. So I want to start by playing for our viewers an excerpt from a new video released by your colleague, Elaine Luria, this morning, featuring testimony related to President Trump's January 7th speech that your committee showed excerpts of during last week's hearing. But let's watch.
Do you recognize what this is?
It looks like a copy of a draft of the remarks for that day.
Okay. And as you can see throughout the document, there are lines crossed out. There's some words added in. Do you recognize the handwriting?
It looks like my father's handwriting.
In my view, he needed to express very clearly that the people who committed violent acts, went into the Capitol, did what they did, should be prosecuted and should be arrested.
It looks like here that he crossed out that he was directing the Department of Justice to ensure all lawbreakers are prosecuted to the full extent of the law. We must send a clear message, not with mercy, but with justice. Legal consequences must be swift and firm. Do you know why he wanted that crossed out?
I don't know.
And that needed to be stated forcefully. They did not represent him or his political views in any form or fashion.
He also has crossed out, I want to be very clear, you do not represent me. You do not represent our movement. Do you know why he crossed that language out of the statement?
I don't know.
Congressman, this seems to be more evidence that President Trump was pushing back against any condemnation of the rioters the day after the riot. What is your interpretation of what has just been released?
I mean, it's more evidence to the fact that he, first off, sat for 3 hours, not doing nothing, but proactively resisting pressure to do something, because I believe he wanted to see where this would go. It's kind of like, well, let's see how this develops over, the next, what would be 3 hours. And then, of course, very tepidly, only when compelled and when he realized that the battle for the Capitol had basically shifted in favor of law enforcement, did he come out with very weak statements. He still said, this is what you get when you steal an election at the end of the day on a tweet. And then the next day, again, it's a matter of, I don't want to disavow these folks. They're fighting for me. And by the way, to anybody that still believes these conspiracies that it was Antifa or FBI directed, then obviously President Trump loves Antifa if that's the case, because he's continuing to say these are my people. So, look, this is just more evidence. We could have had a 5-hour hearing actually on Thursday, but we had to obviously keep that to 2.5 hours, and so more evidence will come out.
And let's talk about Ginny Thomas, because your colleague Liz Cheney said that you are contemplating subpoenaing her if she does not appear voluntarily. How long are you going to wait to try to see whether these talks with her attorney bear fruit?
Yeah, I mean, that's an attorney-to-attorney conversation. Our folks on the committee are very good at knowing when they're being played versus when it's kind of a legitimate negotiation. And they will come forward and say, if we get to that point, hey, it's time to subpoena. Ginny Thomas, it started out as kind of uninterest. We had a few pieces of evidence that we had seen, and then it just grew, particularly with some of the Eastman memos and those conversations, reaching out to state electors. We want to have a voluntary conversation. Just come on in. She said, I think somewhere in the media, that she was eager to talk to the committee. That's it. Come in, let's talk. If we need to subpoena, we will, but we prefer, obviously, to just find out what she knows.
But if she said a while ago now that she was eager to talk, why is it taking so long to secure her cooperation and her appearance?
That's a question for her and the lawyer. Look, it's the same thing. We heard through anonymous sources that Secret Service was eager to come in and testify on some of the limo incidents, and they haven't come in. And it's one thing to put stuff through anonymous sources or to say something in the media. It's another when you have your lawyer saying, "Hey, we need to be we need to do this a little differently. And so if we have to subpoena, we will. We're going to get to the bottom of as much as we possibly can. And hopefully the Department of Justice, not related to our investigation, is looking at whether or not there are potential crimes here.
And to the Secret Service, and the point that the head of the Secret Service again reiterated this weekend, that they are fully cooperating, but they still have not come in. They say they can't recover those text messages from January 5th and 6th. Are you going to try to subpoena their personal phones, which apparently have not yet been checked by the IG, the Homeland Security Inspector General?
Well, certainly an issue we're talking about. Again, there's a lot of behind-the-scene conversations going on. We'd much prefer to get stuff voluntarily. It's an interesting question, obviously, with all these missing texts. Could it be just simply not keeping records and at management? Possibly. Could it be a cover-up? Possibly. We don't know the answer to that. You know, we do know that there are some questions out there. We do know that when you roll over technology, you're required to keep records. So we want to get that answer as best we can. It's why we've decided we're not going to wrap up the investigation. We're going to continue the investigation over the summer, even as we begin to write some of the interim report.
Is that the key piece that you want to nail down, the Secret Service cooperation and what happened to those texts?
You know, it's a part. I mean, there's a lot of, again, we still have people coming in, you know, around the edges, maybe not as explosive as Cassidy Hutchinson's testimony, for instance, but maybe they know a certain piece here. We're going to follow up with some witnesses that maybe, you know, gave us answers that now don't really make a lot of sense with more information that we've gotten. So we have a great investigative team that has done a lot of work over the winter leading into these hearings, and they're going to continue it over the summer. I'm very proud of the team that's been put together. And by the way, this moment in Congress, this committee in Congress, is something quite historic and unfortunately probably will never happen again in terms of polling to the direction of justice.
You've talked a lot, you've created a lot of information about what was happening during those 187 minutes, nearly just about 3 hours. Have you nailed down anything more about the president's communications with Rudy Giuliani during that period?
You know, what we've presented is a significant amount of, we know the conversation. Obviously, one thing we can't do in subpoena is get what was said over the telephone. It's usually what's called call detail records, which is who called who, how long that lasted. Obviously, if people turn over their text messages, we have that. So there's probably going to be some information that, you know, without certain people coming in and telling us the truth, will have to be left to a little bit of mystery. But what we've presented is, I think, compelling enough to say the president absolutely knew what was going on, and he proactively chose not to defend the Article I branch of the Constitution, and that was a decision. And that was a decision utterly at odds with the oath he swore to the Constitution.
In terms of any further communications between the president and Mark Meadows, are you any closer to understanding those conversations?
Yeah, I mean, we have some understanding. There's some stuff, again, that we haven't presented. You may see more in the report. You may see more in future hearings. But I got to tell you, actually, first off, Mark Meadows has been one of our star witnesses. Even though he's not cooperating, his initial tranche of texts that he's turned over really led to a lot of what we've learned in the investigation. And then, as you know, he refused to cooperate with the committee after that. And we have voted to hold him in contempt, and the DOJ so far has not taken action. So I hope they do. I hope he decides to come in and voluntarily cooperate. But if he doesn't, he doesn't. And we'll find the information as best we can.
And you said to reporters after Thursday night's hearing, that clearly the president has criminal exposure. Can you fill in the context of what you think his criminal exposure is and how disappointed you will be if DOJ doesn't follow up?
Well, look, as a not lawyer, as a not prosecutor, I'm going to leave to the DOJ what reaches that threshold. I'll tell you, looking at what we've presented to the American people, if there is not criminality in that, understanding that an attempt to overthrow the government was occurring, doing nothing, behind the scene communications, some of the stuff we're seeing out of Georgia, then I don't know what is breaking the law. And I'll tell you, yes, it's very dangerous to prosecute last administrations. We don't want to get into that as a habit. But if you try a failed coup in this country and you are not prosecuted, if there is evidence, if the DOJ can reach that threshold, I think that sends for the long-term viability of this republic a very bad message. And it sends a roadmap to future people that want to come along and take advantage of their position as president to try to stay in power. Nobody's above the law in this country. Nobody.
And I just want to circle back to the Secret Service for a moment, and with full understanding of all that they do, and I've covered the Secret Service for years with multiple presidents, but does it survive the laugh test that they would do this upgrade at that critical moment in history, then not follow multiple advisories to save everything, which is standard anyway under the Federal Records Act, and then that they would just be missing those 2 days? So is that incompetence in management, or is it something worse?
Okay, so speaking as a committee member, we'll go where the facts lead us on that. Speaking with my opinion, it doesn't pass the laugh test. I mean, it looks at, was that a department decision? Was it individual members' decision? I don't know. But it is either gross mismanagement, gross incompetence on that case, or there's something else there. We'll follow the facts on that, but I think if you just look at it on its surface, it really doesn't make a ton of sense, particularly with how, the federal government is very serious about preserving records, and especially on a day, if you're the Secret Service, like January 6th. It was probably their biggest day, frankly, since 9/11.
Congressman Adam Kinzinger, thank you very much.